I think this album is certainly the most diverse bit of work we've ever done, really. I mean, that certainly stems from just all the kind of bizarre and mixed influences we have that come into the band, whether it be, orchestral music, classical piano music, to like just rock, classic rock, metal in some cases, electronic music, funk. I mean, kind of bits of everything, really. Anything that we kind of like to absorb all of those influences and bring it into the band.
I think with each album we do, I think it's always, we don't always know necessarily what direction it's going to take, but I think the important thing that, the ideas that we have is that we have to try something new. We've never been a band that likes standing in the same place for too long. And when we got in the studio, I think there was a bunch of maybe 18 or 19 songs, but I think what dictated the 12 or 13 that were going to be on the album was which songs feel like they couldn't have been on a previous album. I mean, we spent a lot of time experimenting with a lot of things, with the music and sounds in particular, and I think that's why this album has this kind of freshness to it, because every single song kind of has its own character, and musically they're all very different, but also sonically they're all very different as well. I think we definitely wanted to make an album that sounded fresh and uplifting, and I do feel like we've done that with this album.
Yeah, I think when the band started, it was just the three of us, just a simple sort of three-piece, guitar, bass and drums. So it quickly became apparent that some of the songs we were writing and things required additional instruments. So quite early on, we realised being diverse was going to be important in terms of incorporating other instruments like pianos and orchestras and synths and electronics. So we've always been interested in experimenting with those things. And also, our musical influences are very diverse. I've always liked film music, classical music, as well as dance music and R&B, and so I've always been intrigued in trying to find ways of incorporating that into what is essentially a pretty traditional rock band setup. Across the albums, I think those styles have become more and more sort of prominent and separate to each other. I think on this album they've almost become three separate genres. We kind of have electro-pop on this album, we have obviously sort of classic rock, and we also have pretty much orchestral, sort of almost soundtrack-style music, and I think these three things have become quite separate on this album, and it's great because it almost feels like I think I'm in three different bands, basically. So I think the three of us have all been very open-minded towards music since we started, and I think that's one of the key things that's kept us going and kept it interesting for us.
I mean, the Resistance doing so well as it did, I mean, it was amazing. Blew our minds. We got to play bigger gigs in countries that we've never played before. We played some of the biggest gigs of our lives on that tour, and the whole thing was amazing. But I don't think we feel too much pressure to live up to our past. I mean, it's always been very important for us to kind of close the book on that chapter, or close the book on that album, I suppose, and just have a little break and completely start a new one. I don't know. I mean, when we go in the studio, I mean, we just it's simple, but we're just making the music that we like.
I don't think you really feel that kind of pressure, because you make music that you want to make, and that's the way this band has always been.
I think, and we've all had to be very open-minded, I think, to deal with the success we've had, and also the different types of music we've got into, and all the things we've had to do from, what it is being in a rock band. I think we keep each other in check, basically, because we all remember each other when we're definitely not cool now, but trust me when I say we were a lot less cool when we were in school, so we all remember each other back then. Yeah, the album's called The Second Law, and I think when we were making the album, every time I was watching the news, I kept seeing stuff about this banking crisis, economic crisis, and there seemed to be this sort of paradigm of obsession with growth. The financial news always seems to be obsessed with growth, and I kind of wanted to have a deeper understanding of what's behind that. And so I started looking into it a bit, and it kind of got me into. I remembered things that I read in the sort of late '90s about peak oil and energy dependency, and how economic crashes and collapses and growth and all that stuff is very much related to energy and energy production. So I started reading about energy, and obviously the laws of thermodynamics, and the second law is talking about energy and how energy works. And The second law of thermodynamics tells us that energy basically is decreasing. Unfortunately, it seems to be decreasing everywhere. You know, the universe is spreading out, cooling down. The energy in our bodies and the earth and the sun and the stars and so on seems to be gradually cooling down. So I kind of feel like I became interested more, I suppose, you know, philosophically about what this means, you know, because like evolution and humans seem to be going directly against this second law. You know, we seem to be growing and evolving and wanting to grow and move forward. And it seems like this is kind of the battle that we all have. We have it in our personal lives, we have it in the economy, and I think like so it became like a sort of philosophical thing and kind of a metaphorical thing that I started to sort of spread out throughout the album, basically.
Well, I think every song takes its own journey in the studio, and often like where it starts to where it ends up can be drastically different, and sometimes you know, we kind of set like a few challenges as or goals as to what we wanted to achieve with some of the songs. So yeah, it's kind of random. I mean, it's definitely quite open in the studio when we're working on songs, and we definitely, you know, let the songs be free to go on whatever journey they choose, almost. There's lots of different styles of music on this album, which keeps it exciting.
I think there was a lot of material to start with. I mean, you know, Matt had, you know, I think that both of us, we recorded a lot of demos, you know, very, very rough demos. But I think it was a good way to work, because I think we could, rather than work on like 20 songs all at the same time just to find out that some weren't necessarily right for the album, it gave us a really good idea of which songs would work. And I think the first day, or maybe the first 2 days, we just did a lot of listening, you know, to ideas and the demos that we recorded, and people could really kind of tune into where the songs were going to go. But it was quite interesting because, you know, a lot of the demos, you know, as much as the songs all sounded great, obviously it didn't really sound like Muse until all three of us played our instruments on it, which was quite an interesting thing. I think that's the important thing, is that, you know, if you can try and work out what it is about the band that makes it Muse, you know, and I'm still not exactly sure what that is, you know, but, you know, there is an element that every band has that is theirs and could never be anybody else's. And I think it's important to retain that, particularly if you are branching off so much. But I think the more you can kind of retain that soul of the band, it does give you more of a license to kind of go off and do things like Panic Station or, you know, Madness, or, you know, various other songs on the album which have kind of gone off completely, you know, on a different tangent.
It's, well, I think it's really cool that the Olympics have chosen Survival to kind of represent the London Olympics musically in some kind of way. I think it's great, and they actually asked us to come and to maybe write some music for the Olympics a long time ago, like, you know, 8 months ago, or just before we started making the album, I suppose. And I think, you know, straight away we thought about this one song, which Matt was playing on piano, and we'd jammed it a few times. And just that track, just straight away for us, seemed to kind of, I suppose, like potentially could reflect this, like the enormity of what the Olympics is. You know, we kind of threw everything at it, you know, so we got the choir in, which we've never done before, which is like just so amazing to like see them come in and sing. The choir was amazing, and it just added that extra operatic vibe to the song, you know, which really took it into this much more epic kind of place, really, and it goes for a very epic journey, that song, and I think it's a very Muse-sounding song, Survival. And you know, by the end of it, it was we just wanted to push it as far as we could with like the bombastic feeling of the song, and you know, right at the end, we put the choir in at the end with those chords building up, and then Matt sings the highest note he's ever sang, and you think his head's gonna explode, and we just wanted to kind of push it as far as we've ever gone before with that huge bombastic vibe. But
so obviously, when I was working on that song, you know. Maybe the Olympics was in my mind, but you know, really the lyrics of the song are kind of related to the struggle against losing energy and this like desire to survive and sort of determination. But in the back of my mind, I thought this kind of could relate with the Olympics in some way. But when we actually finished the album, we got a call from the Olympics saying they want us to play at the ending ceremony. And they asked us what we'd like to play, and we said, well, this is the song that we kind of thought may have been suitable for the Olympics in the first place. Maybe we should play this song. So they came in to listen to it, and we started talking about how we're going to play it at the show and everything. They loved the song, and at that point they said, "Oh, we think this would be a great song for the Olympics." And it was like it just seemed like a really unusual coincidence. It was a kind of full circle really that came back to the beginning again. And
It's great, you know. It's sometimes nice to, you know, to be heard. You know, things like that are quite rare for the band because you're exposing your music to a lot of people that don't know who you are. You know, and although the band is quite big, but you know, there's still a hell of a lot of people that don't know who we are. So it's going to be, and a lot of countries that we've not been to where, you know, maybe people don't know who we are. And obviously because the Olympics is just, you know, it's probably the biggest global event ever, you know. So a lot of people who don't know this band will hear the band, which is great. You know, obviously with the Olympics being in London, you know, it's a big deal. You know, it's a big deal for the country, and there's this buzz about the place, and it's something that will happen once in our lifetime. And you know, it's amazing to be associated with that. You know, it's a big honour. The torch relay was amazing. It was something we were asked to do maybe a month before it happened, and we were obviously aware that the torch run was going through our hometown, and obviously we were asked to do a small part of that. And I don't think I realised quite what a big deal it was going to be. I mean, we had to meet up at a point which was about 5 miles away from our hometown. And we got on a bus with all these other torchbearers, and they were doing drop-offs every 300 metres. And it was great because it was really interesting to meet some of the other people that were torchbearers and why they were torchbearers. And we kind of felt a bit small, really, in the big scheme of it, because there were some people on there. We had to do a thing where we were all talking on the bus, why are we here, why have we been asked? And, you know, some people were telling some amazing stories about things that they'd been through or things that they'd done for other people. And then it came to us and it was like, I don't know, we're in a band. I think that's why we've been asked, you know. So it was strange. But then, you know, we started driving on this bus and started doing the route. And, you know, for probably 7 miles, there was just people just lining the streets, and people have come out of their houses, and people were having parties in their gardens. And, you know, we probably drove past tens of thousands of people that day on a relatively small stretch, you know. And then obviously when we got to our bit, and we kind of just got thrust out of the bus and we're just surrounded by people, and some guy came and lit the torch, and then we were off, you know. And it went very quick, you know. It was an amazing minute or so, you know, and it just, you know, I could have carried on running, you know. I was loving it.
Carrying the Olympic torch, I'll say, was the one thing my mum's most proud of that I've ever done in my life. You know, she still can't get over it to this day, and it was great carrying it through our hometown. We got to carry it across the bridge that connects Sholden and Teignmouth, which is kind of where we went to school, where the band formed and where we grew up together. And it was great, you know, we were running across the bridge and we saw like all of our old school friends and ex-girlfriends, and like it was pretty bizarre, all our family, and like it was pretty intense, and I really enjoyed it though.
We ran the Olympic torch into our hometown, from the town across the river into our hometown where we grew up, which was just bizarre, you know. It was like surreal. I mean, it's surreal, like this whole Olympic stuff, you know, running the torch, doing a song, playing at the Olympics, even it just being in London. You know, it's such a once-in-a-lifetime thing to get involved with and experience. So, yeah, so we started running the torch into our hometown. It was just a very kind of surreal experience, really. We had to run 300 metres, which wasn't very far at all. I thought we were going to run like 2 miles, and like properly like knackered, like running through our hometown, you know, waving his torch around. But it was all very kind of regimented, and all the torchbearers ran 300 metres. But it was cool. I mean, it was like we ran across this bridge, Sholden Bridge, and it was like 8,000 people on the bridge, all like cheering us along, and it was just insane. But I hadn't actually been down there for a very long time, so it was, you know, to go back into my hometown like carrying a torch was a pretty weird moment, put it that way. But yeah, it was cool, it was exciting.
Well, it's always difficult when you have to pick an opener for the album, and I think this album there was quite a few contenders to open the album. But I think, you know, that song in particular, there's just so much diversity within that song, you know. And, you know, like we said before, there's a lot of diversity between the songs, but that song in particular, it kind of starts off as this kind of big sleazy metal riff, but then the strings come in and kind of take it somewhere else, and then you know, it's a song that, you know, it's almost very filmic. You know, it kind of takes you on a bit of a journey. It's not. I don't know. Like each section creates different imagery. You know, the verse is kind of almost like a Morricone film or something, and you know the riff is just somewhere completely different. Then you've got this big crazy bit in the middle, and I don't know. I think we just all felt that song was such a journey and a diverse journey that it was kind of great to have something like that to open the album. Well, when we were working on Madness, I mean, the thing that really struck me about that song was, again, it was something that sounded very, very different to what we'd done. You know, I think when Matt first showed us, he'd kind of got a very rough kind of bass synth thing going and just found some really, really simple drum samples. But you kind of got this repetitive hook in the bass line that just, you know, I found really, really hypnotic, you know. And Matt was kind of playing it and then sort of humming along. And I can remember thinking at the time, this is going to be a really great song, you know, because it is so simple. But just, you know, there's the melodies of the hook of the bass line, you know, the drum beat, which is just really hypnotic. And then obviously the vocal melody, which just pulls you in straight away. But I think, you know, that was one song which was a real studio track. You know, we always knew that, you know, in order for that song to work, it had to stay quite true to what Matt had intended in the first place, which was to have a really simple kind of electronic vibe going on, with just this great melody over the top. So I think that probably that song more than any other really grew in the studio, and it was a completely different approach because, you know, there wasn't an awful lot of actual band playing going on, you know, which was kind of nice to actually just put down the instruments for a bit and take a completely different approach to music. And
I think Madness is a real step forward. I mean, we've touched on, like, you know, working with electronics before in the past a little bit, but this time it feels like, with that song in particular, it feels like something really, really fresh for the band.
Madness was a song where we really wanted to keep things a bit more simple and stripped down and write a song that was lyrically easy to relate to and not sort of trying to be too elaborate with things. And it's actually based on pretty much a 12-bar blues, you know, which is very unusual for us as well. The influence is kind of from gospel, soul, that kind of area. And obviously R&B as well. So it's really completely new territory for us musically, and it's a very simple song, and I'd say it's the song I'm probably most proud of on the album for sure.
Well, I think Panic Station, when we first started working on that, it just kind of had this fresh feeling to it, you know, and it was something that was, you know, even without singing, it just had this vibe to it that was just really, really uplifting, in a way that maybe music we've done before didn't. And I don't think everything we've done before is negative, but you know, it's you know, it has got this really kind of uplifting feel to it. And I think it's the first time we've, you know, been influenced by maybe some funk stuff, you know.
Panic Station does feel like a bit of a departure because of how fun it is in nature. You know, I think there's you know, the biggest probably misconception about the band is that we're like these three serious dudes that just sing about the world ending and the apocalypse, you know. But I think, which we're not really, you know, but I think Panic Station is quite different for the band this time around because it really shows us like having fun. And as soon as we started jamming on that groove and the fact that we thought having a slap bass was so funny, we just had fun with it. I mean, when you hear it, you can kind of, I can hear us having fun with that song, you know. Kind of makes you smile, makes you want to kind of dance or whatever.
Yeah, Panic Station was definitely a really fun track for us, and I think it was us sort of reconnecting with when we first formed and the kind of music we were into when we were kids, because, you know, this band started when we were 15, but when I was like growing up, I remember films like Ghostbusters and Romance in the Stone and all this kind of, this great sort of 80s fun films, and I sort of, I kind of wanted to sort of capture a little bit of that, sort of that fun side of music that we love, and so we kind of went there with that. It's kind of a sort of straight funk track, and we kind of we got the brass section in. That was the lead trumpet player was the same trumpet player who played on Superstition by Stevie Wonder, and that was another influence on that track, and that was a nice coincidence because that was I think when we recorded that brass part, it was the guy, the session player told us it was 40 years, I think, to the day or something, or to the week at least, that he was recording Superstition. So that was a nice link up, but yeah, that's just us sort of being a bunch of kids having fun, really, you know.
Well, I think Follow Me started life as very much like a three-piece band song, and I think we all knew that it could be a very important song on the album. But I think once we'd recorded it as a band, I guess we felt that it maybe wasn't going anywhere new. It maybe felt like that approach was obviously been done before, and I think maybe for that song we just felt that maybe we would, it would benefit the song to go somewhere completely different. So it kind of went through a few different transitions, and it went from being a band song, and then it kind of ended up in this kind of halfway house where it was kind of half electronic and half band, and and at that point didn't really sound. We didn't know what it was sounding like. It just sounded a bit confused. So I think at that point we made the decision. We're like, do we go back to being a band song? If we're going to go electronic, let's just go fully electronic. So we did, and I think it really suited the song, and again, it made the song sound like something new and something that couldn't have been on any other album that we've done.
Follow Me was a song that we, as I said, we worked it up as a rock song, and then we kind of wanted it to be reworked and someone to do something with it that was going to come back and make us perceive the song completely differently. But at the same time, we didn't want to lose the traditional kind of, the rock arrangement of the song and the energy of the song. And we got Nero to do a mix on that song, and that's kind of what ended up being the album version, yeah. And once we recorded it, we decided to replace everything with electronics and electronic sounds and samples, so it ended up with being almost entirely electronically created. But we did that so that it was, even though it was electronic, it still had the energy and sound of a rock band. And
I don't know, even Follow Me is a very kind of electronic sound, and we actually worked a little bit with Nero on that one. They kind of did a bit of additional production on that song, so that was a bit of a collaboration almost with those guys, and that was really cool to do, and something I'm sure we'd like to do more of in the future.
It's one of the more personal songs on the album. I wrote that song within the sort of month before and the month after having a baby. It's the sort of song that is most influenced about becoming a father, basically. And the first few weeks of the baby's life was just unbelievable. It was kind of that feeling of wanting to create protection and safety. So that's kind of what the song's about. And actually, just before the baby was born, my girlfriend had this thing around her stomach where you could hear the heartbeat. So I actually recorded that on an iPhone, and I used that rhythm and that tempo of the heartbeat as the beginning of the song. So at the beginning of the song, you can actually hear my son's heartbeat in utero, which kind of formed the base of the song. I was actually just going to write this kind of orchestral piece around it, but it ended just sort of growing and growing, and it ended up becoming this song, Follow Me. Big Freeze is definitely a song that's a kind of relationship song, singing about relationships, singing about conflict in relationships, and singing about and sort of using the sort of metaphor of the second law and energy and trying to keep energy alive and all that kind of thing. It's a pretty personal song. That was another real fun song for us to record because it was actually one of the more simple tracks on the album, very straight drum beat and a kind of really sort of simple guitar and sort of vocal line and very melodic. The actual chordal structure again on that one was quite influenced by gospel music as well, even though you wouldn't think that to listen to it, but the original song was written almost like a gospel track, and then we kind of worked it up from there and it ended up becoming more like a kind of rock track.
Save Me in Liquid State, obviously it was the first time that this band, I'd written for this band and obviously sang, and it was quite a strange thing at first because obviously Matt Up to Date had written everything and sang everything, so it felt like a completely new venture for the band. But I think it was something that was kind of in the background for a long time, but never really happened. I think I think in the past I'd kind of written music, but I'd struggled to write lyrics, so obviously I never really had anything concrete that I could show to the band. And I think there were just various personal experiences that I went through that inspired me to write. It was the first time I really thought, I'm going to actually sit down and write some lyrics. I felt like I had something to say. Sometimes it takes a while to find that. But I think in the back of my mind when we first started working on those songs, I always thought Matt would maybe want to sing them. But I think the more that the songs developed, and obviously the lyrics, they were very personal, I think it just made sense for me to sing them. I think it would have been strange for Matt to sing lyrics that were kind of clearly about me. And I think Matt was keen for me to have a go. It was nice. He kind of said, look, you've written the lyrics. It's your song. Why don't you try and sing it? It'd be a great thing for the band. It'd be a great thing live, because Matt can just get loose on the guitar and not have to be worried about running back to his mic to sing, and and I think it just felt like a big step for the band, and something that hopefully can be explored more in the future. I think with each album you learn a lot, you venture into new areas, and things that we've learnt now aren't necessarily things that we're going to use in the future. I think for us, music is always an education. There's so much music out there. There's so much from the past, to draw on and to listen to. And, every time you listen to music, whether it's something that you like or you don't like, you will always learn something. And that's what music is. No one ever peaks when they make music. You can always get better, whether it's playing your instrument or whether it's singing or writing or producing. There's always improvements to be made. And I think that's what we enjoy about making music, is that you will never ever quite feel like you've reached the top. You always feel like you can do something better. It doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks. You think that personally, and I think that's the beauty of making music, because sometimes when you do reach the top of something, it's very difficult, because you're kind of like, well, that's it. Where do I go from here? There is no more up. And I don't think you ever feel like that when you make music.
I think, you always learn so much when you make an album. You learn a lot about each other, a lot about how each other plays. You just learn a lot about music and all sorts of things. I think we've learned that we're kind of still not afraid to be open and try new things. I think that's always been one of the main driving forces of the band in some ways when we approach an album, is just to, really try and find new ideas and not get too comfortable. Pushing each other out of our comfort zones is something we always attempt to do in the studio, which is great, because that's how you find new ideas, really. But I guess, we felt pretty chuffed also that we were able to produce another album by ourselves. So I think that confidence in a production kind of role as well was something we learned more about, and certainly realised that we could do it pretty well, I hoped. It sounds like it to me anyway. But so I think... but, the great thing about music is you never stop learning, there's always so much more to kind of discover and learn, so looking forward to that process.
The process of making this album there's been a lot of, we've learned quite a lot doing it. I think as producers, I think we've really learned so much. I mean, I've learned how to write for a brass section and for a choir as well. That's been the first time we've ever done that, and that was it's really great learning how these different instrumentalists, how the different kind of ranges they have, the different dynamics they have, and working with them on what they want to be able to offer as well. I think that was a really big learning process, and also just be, as I said, the open-mindedness that we've always had, I think, has just proven to be really great on this album, because we've managed to create, I think, for ourselves some completely different, almost completely different genres to what we've done before. And in the case of Chris doing his songs, it's been great to have him coming forward as a songwriter for the band, and also wanting to be singing as well. So that's great for me, because I can just sit and concentrate on the guitar for a bit, and take a back seat for a bit. And so it's been lots of brand new things that have happened, and lots of great sort of learning processes. Yeah. All I can say is that all three of us are just so open-minded. I think that's the most important factor. I think that's really kept us together and kept the music exciting for us. And I think that I turned up on the last album, Resistance, with a kind of symphonic piece, a 3-part kind of classical piece, and I was like, hey, let's do this, and they were like, yeah, cool, great, man, let's go for it. And I was, I don't think it's like that in every band, really. I feel very lucky. I'm sure the guys feel the same. That we're all just very lucky to be in a band with open-minded people who are not really afraid to try anything.